Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. It is good to be with you again this week. Listeners, it's been several weeks. I've missed you. It's good to be here. Scott can't join us today. He is in clinic, but we have not even a real update. We have like a hint of an update coming. This is technically our 250th full episode to publish. However, we are not numbering this one episode 250. Episode 250 will stand alone. Episode 250 will be recorded in public with you at Factory Obscura, coming in like 2 months. Okay, so we are working towards it. I don't want to quite announce the date yet till we get everything locked down, but it'll be around the end of November or 1st of December. That will be our official 250th episode celebration. It'll be a big live event. It'll be fun. You will have to buy a reasonably priced ticket to come, and your generous donation will be split between us and Factory Obscura. We're very excited about that. Just more details soon, okay? Like it's happening. We're nearly there. We just got to get a few things out of the way. For one, we are recording this on Tuesday, September 19th, which is National Voter Registration Day. I hope if you're listening to this, you are already a registered voter. If you're not, I don't know how you stumbled upon this podcast, but we're glad you're here. And please immediately stop listening and go to letsfixthis.org/vote to register to vote. You can do it online now. Go do it. letsfixthis.org/vote. If you are already registered, as I assume many of you are, why don't you take that link and text it to all of your friends, right? Tell everyone you know, send it to your colleagues at work, send whatever, just say, hey, I hope you register to vote. If you're not already, here's the link where you can do it. letsfixthis.org/vote. Okay. Over the last few weeks, we have been, in addition to planning and strategizing around our upcoming 250th episode, we've been really having some great kind of behind the veil, in-house community conversations with some partners about the issues that are really affecting our state. And one of the things that keeps coming up over and over again is the issue of affordable housing, and all of the stuff that goes into that. Homelessness, tenant rights, right? The cost of housing, of rents, all this stuff goes in. And so we are excited for you to hear this episode with some new friends that are relatively new to Oklahoma, although not really, but an organization with whom you might not yet be familiar. Today, joining me in studio is Brad Centers from ShelterWell, and we're going to talk about housing. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. I'm good. Happy to be here.
This is very exciting. So maybe we'll just start at the top and just tell us a little bit about who ShelterWell is and how you all got started and the kind of work you do.
Yeah, definitely. So ShelterWell is a housing stability nonprofit here based in Oklahoma County. We're fairly new. We've been up and running since about June, although we've been kind of working on the roots of that for a little bit longer. We formed out of Community Cares Partners, which was the local public-private partnership that was tasked with delivering rental assistance during the pandemic.
Was that technically like ARPA dollars, or was that the other money before the ARPA?
Yeah, the other. It was ERA funds.
Okay.
It was about $360 million.
Yeah.
A lot of money that was always meant to be finite. It was intended to expire. Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but you said $360 million,
Right?
which sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah.
But as we all know, like the rent is too damn high.
Yeah.
And so that it doesn't go as far as
It goes fast.
Yeah.
It went really fast, especially sort of my team was specifically tasked with the eviction cases. So we were at court, people that were already facing evictions and that money went just as fast. So.
Sure. Yeah.
So we kind of got together, started brainstorming some ways that we could still be of assistance in that area without actually cutting the check. I love rental assistance. It was certainly beneficial for so many ways, but there's just not that money out there all the time. So, what are some other ways we can kind of insert into that lane and kind of help slow the evictions down, keep people in their homes, which of course eventually then leads to less people experiencing homelessness if you can keep them there to begin with. So we formed ShelterWell. We focus on sort of tenant education and communication. We've got an education program launching here pretty soon in the next month or so, educating tenants on their rights, on how to keep up an apartment, and what to look for in an apartment, how to not get swindled by fancy ads, stuff like that. Make sure you can afford it. Make sure you can keep up with it. And then even, moving in and out, what to look for, the checklists. We're very proud of our website, ShelterWell.org. It's got a lot of good information on there on tenants' rights, which we've worked really hard on formulating based on a lot of the things that we've seen every day in court for the last couple of years with CCP. We also do mediation in eviction court, and outside of it, we've got trained mediators in court, which is essentially just a neutral third party to help both the plaintiff and defendant, both sides of the case, work out an amicable solution for both people and hopefully keep a tenant housed and keep a landlord happy as well. So we're very excited. We've been working hard, and we're now starting to get to launch a lot of those things we've been working for a while on, and we're really happy about it.
That's really exciting. Well, let's talk a little bit about, the landscape of housing in Oklahoma. You mentioned apartments, but this extends to rental houses and stuff, any kind of rental property.
Right.
And, I think most everybody, I know I've, rented houses and apartments in my life, and I have almost no idea about what my rights were as a tenant. I had good experiences in some cases, had bad experiences in some cases.
Yeah, same.
Definitely know that I left hundreds of dollars on the table because I didn't know, I knew they were in the wrong, but I didn't know what I could do about it. And I just decided to move on. And so, I would imagine that tenant education is a big need for a lot of folks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's, for all of us involved in it as well. I had a paralegal background. I've been in the court setting for the last 10, 12 years. It wasn't until CCP that I even learned about housing stuff. And I was pandemically unemployed as well. So there was a time where I was like, oh my gosh, is my landlord going to show up on my door?
Right.
And then knowing that, no, they can't do that. Right.
Right.
There is at least a legal process, whether, we can discuss, of course, how unfair it is towards the tenant, but there is a legal process that they have to go through. So it's educating people, letting them know that, look, if you just getting a notice on your door doesn't mean you got to leave.
Right. So before we started recording, you were regaling me with some statistics that I thought were staggering. And you can have it run through them. The one that stands out to me is that you said in a given month, or in the month of August, just recently, there were 1,600 eviction filings. Is that statewide, or is that just one county?
Yeah, so that's just for Oklahoma County.
Moly.
Although Oklahoma as a state is also way too high. But because we're focused just in Oklahoma County, and like I said, we're at court every day. That's 1,600 filings for Oklahoma County.
Gosh, and roughly half of those result in the tenant being evicted.
Yeah. Generally, what I've seen, and I don't have the specific numbers for August before me, but generally throughout the year, about half of those end in judgments. The other half are generally dismissed because the tenant, paid or they worked something out.
Right.
But yeah, about half of those are what we call judgments, and that's the tenant then being ordered to leave their residence.
Essentially, right? That's almost 1,000 people a month becoming homeless.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about the homeless, situation,
right.
Okay, well, here's one source of homelessness, right? People being evicted from their homes for, I would imagine, a myriad of reasons, but maybe usually it's because of non-payment?
It's mostly because of non-payment, and it's generally about a month's of rent. I think the median amount of rent that was filed for, so what the plaintiff was suing for, was about $1,500 in August. And I always explain it to people like this. You think of people experiencing homelessness as this just growing reservoir, right? And then you've got all these other tributaries that are, low pay or mental health and substance abuse. And then evictions is one of them, man. And if you can go all the way back to, and we're conducting some surveys right now to try to link that with hard data from people getting evicted to becoming homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these questions we're asking people is, just if you're evicted today, how confident are you that you'll find a new place, or where are you going to go?
Mm-hmm.
And most generally, a good portion of the answers are, I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm not confident. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I remember in 2016, actually, I was living in a rent house, and I had great landlords. They were super accommodating and responsive, and ideal, right? But they came to our time to renew. I've been there for a year, and their son had lived in the house before. He was going to live in it again. So they told me a month out, and they said, hey, listen, like, our son's going to college. He's going to move back in, so we're going to need you to move out at the end of the month. And so I had a month's notice to find someplace to live. And it was really hard. I remember driving around. This is after the Thanksgiving ice storm in 2016. I remember I started driving at like Hefner Road, and like drove from, I kind of knew the part of town I wanted to live in, but I drove from like Portland to Western and just went through like every neighborhood, all from Hefner Road down to, 10th Street or so. And like just looking for rent houses for me and my kids, and like taking them down. And I was like, this is a daunting task.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I had a month. If you only had 5 days, right?
5 days. And then imagine doing that with a judgment on your record.
Yeah.
Or not even a judgment, just the fact that a case was filed. We've pulled a lot of landlords of, would you file to someone with an eviction on your, with an eviction filing? Even if it's dismissed, it's been filed on you. Odds are they're gonna turn your back.
Right.
So we're evicting people, not letting them rent anywhere else. Where are they gonna go?
Yeah. So if I threw out the 5-day thing because you said it earlier, but is that the timeline? If there's a judgment, people have 5 days to.
Well, no. So the 5 days is how far out the case has to be set after it's filed. So essentially, the timeline for you, say you're behind on your rent. A lot of places give you a grace period to like the 5th or whatever, right? You don't pay it on the 6th. They have to give you what's called a 5-day notice, and that 5-day notice says cure it or get out, right? So you've got to pay that rent within the 5 days. After that 5 days is up, you haven't paid your rent, the landlord no longer has to accept it, and then they can go file an eviction case in the county courthouse. So once they get that filed, it then has to be set 5 days later. So if that case is filed today, it's going to be set within 5 days. And that's holidays, weekends, right? So that day you show up and you get a judgment on your record. The judge, orders the plaintiff won their case. From there, you have 48 hours to get out.
Oh, golly.
Yeah. So the plaintiff can then, and it's going to be the sheriff that's locking you out, right? They can put a notice on your door. You have 48 hours, get yourself and everything out of there, or they're going to lock the door on you. Right. So it's, it's less than a 2-week process that you get that notice and you're out.
That's nuts. I mean, there's no other case you can file and get a date in 5 days.
Yeah, right. And we've also seen that too, that's not normal nationwide either.
Oh, okay.
We've got, I've talked to many other programs, eviction diversion programs, mediation programs, and a lot of the time it's at least 15 to 20 days. There's one in Madison, Wisconsin. It's the first date is set 15 days out. It's over Zoom, not even with a judge. It's like just a navigator, right? And then if nothing can be worked out, it'll be set with a judge 15 days later. So that's a whole month.
Yeah, which at least gives you, even if okay, there's no way I can pay this, at least you've got some runway to start finding something.
Yeah, to find something, to attempt, to gain other resources, to find other resources, to make some arrangements. Most of the time, what I've seen in Oklahoma County is most of the cases are for less than a month's of rent. And like I said, we do mediation in court, and we found that a lot of the mediations too, it's you can work out that payment plan within a couple of weeks, and find other ways to get it done.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that landlords aren't even required to accept it. So if it's they put the notice on there and then you have the money on day 7, they can be like, nope, too late.
Yep, you didn't.
I don't want your money. Yeah. I'd rather take you to court.
Yep.
Which is an insane thing to say. Yeah. As a landlord.
Right.
What is it for a landlord? What does it take to what's like there's a filing fee, I assume, to file the case?
Yeah. So they just gotta, a lot of it is just dotting their I's and making sure they file. You know, they have to serve you with the notice, with the 5-day notice, give you that chance to pay it. And then from there, and the 5 days just for non-payment of rent. They can do 48-hour notice if they think it's, something's criminal going on, or a lease violation.
Wow. Okay.
Which,
a lease violation, like you have a dog you're not supposed to, or something.
Right. So there are ways that they can do it. But for non-payment of rent, it's the 5 days, and then they go file the case. Generally, it's about $58. If the debt is less than $5,000, which most of them are, they pay $58 to file the case. They can pay another $50 to have the sheriff serve you with the notice. A lot of the times they'll do private process service or something like that. But yeah, you get a case filed for about $60.
So it only costs the landlord $60 to file you with that court document.
Right.
How does that stack up nationally?
It's what I found. I mean, there are some basically the data is out there that the cheaper it is, the easier it is for landlords to evict. I know that in Alabama, who has a very low eviction rate, their filing cost averages out about $270.
Right. So
it's
still not expensive.
Yeah, still not expensive, but it doesn't leave the courts to be susceptible as a bargaining chip.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Which we know, anybody who's ever been in the Oklahoma County Courthouse, those guys are overworked and underpaid. You know, like they have no shortage of things to do. But we have no problem like clogging up all this with these eviction cases. And I think if you had higher filing fees, you would be much more inclined to work out alternate resolution measures.
Right.
Maybe try mediating before court. Any number of reasons. But it's using it as the threat of removal as the only way that I can get you to pay your rent, I think is short-sighted and isn't working.
Yeah, golly, I'm just like, this is all adding up in my head of like, if there's, we'll say, I don't know if that's an average, but like 1,600 cases a month, all of which are going to be heard within 5 days. Like that's an enormous amount of manpower and resources that the county has to put up for that.
Absolutely.
And then if someone, even if they have a low, today's rate, like a cheap rent of $600, okay, well, if the filing fee to get that money back is only $60, you're willing to pay. But if it's $300, like, well, that's getting closer to what it would cost for the actual money itself, and the incentives are changed, right?
And then if you think about on the landlord side, if they do get them out, the sort of the turnover cost and the making it ready and stuff like that. So,
and to be clear, I know the conversation is probably comes across as disparaging towards landlords, but we don't necessarily mean like. I'm sure there's listeners that we have that own a couple of rental properties, right? It's probably not them we're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I certainly want to make that clear too. Like I don't think landlords are the bad guy. I think I have spoken with a lot of good, quote unquote mom and pop landlords. They got a couple of properties. I get it. I get that. What we do have a problem with though, however, is giant corporations from California and Texas, and they come in here and they buy these 300, 400 unit properties, and then sit back in their office in California and don't do anything about it. Like those are the people that I want to fix. You know what I mean? Like taking advantage of Oklahomans. You know? I don't ever want this us versus them, landlords versus tenants. I don't think it's that way. But we can all be Oklahomans and agree that we don't want somebody coming in and taking advantage of our citizens.
Right.
And I think a lot of that happens. You get, especially with these big properties, they go, through maintenance goes through a portal. You don't know who your property management is, and you get to court, you don't know who your property management is, right? And I don't think that's fair.
Right.
Especially,
I mean, there's some corporations that like have the name and the corporation on a sign outside, so you might know, but there's a lot of them that aren't. Like you're renting an apartment from, Apple Tree Farms or whatever the name of the complex is. It's always some kind of like plant. And then like a street, or Pear Avenue.
Yeah, they have an online generator.
All those. And so something that sounds happy, flowing waters, whatever it is. But you don't know who owns that.
Right.
And you don't know that same company owns 300 apartment complexes across the country, and they're listed on the, Dow Jones because that's a big real estate investment trust.
Right. And a thing too, and let's say the benefit of the doubt that they're not intending to take advantage of Oklahomans, right? Well, it's still built into their business model, evictions, that is, right? It's a hardline policy. You owe a month's rent on the day 6, we're filing an eviction, right? I knew a tenant who I had conversations with, and because she was in eviction court every month, and I asked her, and I said, what are the you're in court, but the case gets dismissed. You end up getting your rent paid. What is it? What can be done to help you out? She said, I can pay my rent every month. I just don't get paid until the 9th.
Uh-huh.
By then, the time's already ran.
Right.
And it's like, so we're filing on this poor tenant every month, knowing that she's going to pay her rent on the
right.
night. Can we not just move her due date?
Right.
Why can't we just move her due date? Well, it's policy.
Right.
Right. That's it. That's all it is.
I was going to say the exact same thing. When I was in college, I had a roommate that was out of college, a few years older than me, and he was late with our rent or our electric bill every month, and we'd get cut-off notices. And I was like, "You paid every month, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And the same deal. It's like, I don't get paid till the end of the month, like the 20th. And he's like, and by then we've missed the 2 things. And I was like, let's call somebody and ask.
Yeah,
right. There are some credit card companies and some other bills that will let you. Your mortgage, sometimes they'll let you pick the day of the month that you pay on, so it's responsive to your schedule. Right. But if you happen to be late once and then just get off the cycle, it can have long-term consequences for someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially when you think about low-income individuals who you have to make a decision between getting groceries or paying their rent on time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's that's where this us versus them battle kind of sets us apart, because it doesn't have. I don't believe that someone not paying the rent means that they're out buying nefarious things with it. You know what I mean? I think there's studies out there that have shown that lump sums of cash work. Yeah. Like that people pay their bills and they get back on their feet. And I just when you're set with that decision in front of you of paying your rent on time or buying groceries or taking your daughter to the doctor because she's been coughing all week, those are real decisions people have to make. And just assuming that because they didn't pay their rent by the 6th, that who knows what they're out there doing with it, I think it's very unfair. Right.
There's a lot of assumptions that go into this, including the presumption that the landlord is always right.
Yeah, absolutely, sure, and that's right, and that's kind of how the law is based. The Landlord-Tenant Act is in desperate need of sort of some modernization. We're one of, I think, I don't want to get the quote wrong, I think it's like 6, but we're one of very few states that have 0 anti-retaliation clauses in their Landlord-Tenant Act. And it hasn't been updated in a long time. It was written at a time where neither party really had attorneys in eviction court, which is not the case anymore. I would say at least 70% of the plaintiffs on any given docket have an attorney, whereas for tenants it drops to like 10%.
Right.
And your only option is legal aid services, which is fantastic. I love them to death. They do great work. But again, talking about being overworked and underpaid, they need more attorneys. They need more.
Right. So if you are a renter in an apartment complex and you're behind on rent for any reason, right? You were in the hospital for a few days and just didn't have a chance to write the check. I mean, like legitimately simple things. And there's a good chance that corporate landlord is going to have an attorney, right? They have an attorney on retainer whose job is to file evictions.
Yes.
And you are a person who just got out of the hospital. Yeah. You don't have an attorney to try to stand up. You barely have money for rent, much less to go find someone to help out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and maybe or maybe not rightly so, you go for the ones that do show up to court, they're hoping, praying the judge will grant me some goodwill, right? I can tell my story and the judge is going to believe me. Unfortunately, the judge can't do that. It's all based on the law, right? As long as the landlord served their notices correctly, that's it. You know? And I don't want to speculate on whether or not the judges would side with either side, but they don't have the option to.
Right. If the judge's hands are tied, then it doesn't matter if they're a good guy or a bad guy, right? Like that's obviously like a broad generalization.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Judges, but and so were you all involved? I know this last legislative session there was a bill to amend the Landlord-Tenant Act and include some anti-retaliation measures, right, to protect renters, right? To protect
Right.
tenants.
That was the intention, to sort of be able to protect renters when they need to file a code complaint, or even just maintenance requests. Repeated maintenance request. If my AC's out and in the heat of summer, and I'm hounding you as the landlord to get it fixed, you can't then file on me because I won't leave you alone about my AC. Right. That's just not fair. It fell short, didn't get the votes, and I think for the most part is due to well-intentioned efforts to protect the local landlords like we talked about, which that's fine. I get that, However, like I said, there's the big corporate issues, and I also don't think that rights are finite. Giving a tenant more rights isn't taking them away from the landlord.
Right.
Rising tide lifts all boats. You know what I mean? And that's kind of my stance on it. So I think we can get that through, just as long as we get everybody involved. And that's another thing, too, with ShelterWell. We believe that housing is a human right. And I believe that if you also believe that, we can kind of put away the labels and the me versus you thing. And it's just like, I believe that you deserve a home to live in. So let's figure out how we can keep you there, whatever it may be. There's resource connection. There's educating you on how to upkeep it, how to communicate with your landlord. I find a lot of issues with that is just the lack of communication. It's being scared. It's not knowing how to do it. Shoot, I have that problem. I have a problem talking to the clerk at 7-Eleven.
Sure.
I can get having that anxiety when dealing with things with their landlord. Do I bring it up now? Do I hope it works itself out?
Right.
Maybe if I don't do anything, I can just sneak a check in. They won't say anything. It's like, I get that. But if we bring up the issue, if we figure out how we can fix it, we come up with options, payment plans, even if it's, a move out date, even if it's, okay, let's find a way to get you out of this lease, get you in a new place so we can at least avoid eviction court, avoid that judgment on your record. You get that judgment on your record, a lot of places aren't going to rent to you. You have a case filed on you.
Right.
A lot of places aren't going to rent to you. So there's so many ways, going back to sort of the reservoir of people experience homelessness. The further we go back upstream and start helping people, then the quicker that reservoir shrinks.
Yeah, sure. I'm thinking about being in an apartment complex years ago, and the sprinkler system, like the fire suppression system, in the ceiling was leaking in my unit, and it was dripping on the carpet. And I'd been at the office 2 or 3 times, and the person in the office changed about every 3 months. So you have to go meet the new person and tell them your whole story, and keep submitting things. And it was right in the living room, right by my TV, and I'd moved furniture, and the carpet just was getting worse and gross. And then I was like, I don't know what chemicals are in here, and tried to raise it up the level. And then eventually it got to be the end of my lease, and I was going to move out. I was kind of sick of this. There had been a few things there were issues. I'm like, I'm moving to a different complex. And so when I moved out, they refused to give me my deposit back because of the carpet. And I was like, I didn't ruin the carpet, guys. Like, I've got a bunch of, they're like, well, do you have copies of those letters? And I was like, no, I didn't think to make a copy of the letter that I gave you. There was like 12 of them.
Yeah.
So I just was very mad, and I, tried not to yell at the girl in the office whose job, it was not her fault. She was new, but I also felt like that was like $500 that I really needed for a deposit on another apartment. And I was being deprived of it for ridiculous, wrong reasons. But I thought, well, I guess if I call an attorney, it's going to cost more than $500. So I'm just going to eat it. Right. And just have to call my parents and be like, can I borrow, some money for this deposit? But it was really frustrating because I had no idea what else to do.
And that's a lot of it too. People just don't know the rights. I mean, specifically in that situation, if you have a repair, you can fix that yourself and deduct it from your rent. However, here's the caveat. You have to mail your landlord a letter, a certified letter that says this needs to be fixed. If you're not fixing it in this many days, I'm going to fix it and deduct. People don't know that. And even if you think about it, they do. Like the amount of work that takes for someone to then type up a letter, get certified mail, and do all that. Because if you don't do that, and I hear this every day in court, well, I didn't pay my rent because this, and this. Like you said,
Right.
there's dripping water
Right.
for whatever reason. The judge is going to say, well, did you serve them a letter? You didn't? Sorry, there's nothing I can do.
Right. I think, is it that we as tenants expect that this is a transactional relationship, that I pay rent and you take care of the thing? And in practice, it's like two different contracts. One is I pay rent, that's my contract, and then you are supposed to, but they're not necessarily tied in that way. Because a lot of folks are like, oh, I'm going to take it off the rent. And it's like, well, you can't really do that.
Right. And that's not for you to decide.
Right.
You know, right?
Right. Yeah. Your job is to pay the rent and
Or if it's you go to extreme of like habitability issues, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, right? Well, to me, a giant hole in the wall because you took out my AC unit, that's not habitable. It's like, well, maybe it is, maybe it's not.
Right. Yeah. Sure it is.
Right.
Just put some curtains over it. It's fine. It's
you got
a feature.
a roof over your head.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Be happy.
Right. What's a few little roaches, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
A couple of mice. They're friendly. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned tenant education as being a big thing, and is the website the best way for people to get in touch with ShelterWell?
Absolutely. Please hit up the website. There are kind of numerous ways to get in contact with us. We've got a newsletter coming out. There's a full tenant page on the website where you can kind of share your story with us if you have been evicted or you're going through eviction. I definitely want to hear that. Like as we've been talking about before, getting to the lawmakers who make these decisions, those stories matter. They absolutely matter. So I want to hear that. There's ways for landlords to get in contact with us on the page. We're now offering, I definitely want to mention a pre-filing mediation program. I mentioned before we do mediation in court on the day of eviction. Those cases are sent to us at the discretion of the judge, what cases she wants to be, or they want to be mediated. However, we've got a pre-filing mediation program as well too. So now, before you file that case, save your money filing it. Let us try to work out an agreement. A mediator is a neutral third party. They don't make any decisions. It's just an attempt to come to an agreement. I find a lot of the cases that are filed are for less than a month's rent, and a lot of the mediations I do, 70% end up in agreements. Of all the mediations I've done this year, 70% end in agreements, and that's generally what it is. It's less than a month of rent. It's, hey, I'm getting back to work. Can I just get 2 weeks?
Right.
Or it's something along those lines. So pre-filing mediation can really help with that before getting to court.
So is that pre-filing mediation program aimed at landlords? Are they the ones that need to interact?
Yes. Right. I'm very glad you asked that. It can be requested by either side. So if the tenant thinks that would be beneficial to them, absolutely, they can still reach out. But yes, as you can kind of surmise, it takes a voluntary effort on both sides. So if your landlord doesn't want to participate, I can't force them. Yeah. But I found we've gotten a lot of good feedback from landlords who do want to participate. So that I'm really looking forward to that, and I think it will be beneficial. But yeah, it does take both parties a sort of a good faith effort to go through with it.
Sure. I mean, I can imagine if I was a landlord and just knowing that was like an option, right? To be like, oh, well, I would personally rather go through a third party mediator that is helping this occur in good faith than to mess with the courts.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of landlords that are kind of already doing that themselves. You know, that they do make every attempt before actually filing. I don't want to give the impression that landlords just willy-nilly, because I do think there are some out there that make those attempts to connect to resources or have that conversation before. And so, hey, let us do that for you.
Yeah, and I would imagine next year for the legislative session that you guys would take another run at bringing up this Landlord-Tenant Act.
Yeah, absolutely. We're a part of a couple really good local coalitions. The Coalition for Affordable Housing is one, and then the Housing Stability Coalition. And we all kind of get together and talk about those things and really start figuring out the ones that we want to hit hard. Certainly anti-retaliation is going to be there. And we use a lot of our stories from court to help guide some of that stuff as well. Definitely anti-retaliation is one. Like we talked about before, sort of upping the filing fee, extending the timeline. There are a lot of they're not going to be huge things, but I mean, any little dent we can make, I think is very helpful.
It strikes me that, I mean, all this stuff goes really to helping protect Oklahomans from corporate bullies, right?
Yeah, right.
And been kind of off and on reading this history of Oklahoma politics, really how our state was founded and the principles that went into our founding documents, and when our state constitution was written. There's some bad things in there too, but one of the big things, right, is that the framers of our state constitution wanted to protect our state from corporations. Like that was the term they used, right?
Right.
And it had a different connotation in 1907 than it does today, but the principle is the same, right? That there are big corporations with corporate interests that might not align with the values or the needs of Oklahomans, and this is one reason that our state constitution was at the time the longest governing document in the world, right? Like the one piece of our constitution that people often cite is that it includes the temperature at which kerosene would ignite, the flash point, and that was because there were corporations selling watered down kerosene that would ignite at a lower temperature, and so they were like, no, this is the actual temperature. It's how you know it's real kerosene,
Right.
as a statutory protection against, corporate bullying, right? And malfeasance. And it here, 120 whatever years later, we're still dealing with that. We're still trying to find ways to say, hey, listen, let's recognize that Oklahomans have a right to have a roof over their head, to have housing, to have food. And if the threat to that is somebody's profits, I'm not opposed to capitalism, but I am opposed to corporate bullying and the extraction of the rights of our people here.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that everybody can get behind too. Regardless of the polarization of politics, right? We don't want outsiders coming in bullying Oklahomans, right? We believe at ShelterWell that housing is a human right. And I don't think that's some crazy idea either.
Right.
But if you believe housing is a human right, then I think we can sort of put aside any differences and kind of come together on actual solutions. Especially, when you think about it too, if we want to get into sort of the money aspect of it, because I feel like a lot of times you have to relate things to how much money's being spent and, how we can help taxpayers or the workforce or whatever, right? But if the amount of money that's being spent on aftercare services of people being evicted, so, social services or shelters or stuff like that, if we can take just a portion of that and work on prevention services, then not only are we saving money, but we're then minimizing the people experiencing homelessness, minimizing the population of people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, for sure. Brad, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. This has been fantastic.
My guest today has been Brad Centers from ShelterWell. If you'd like to learn more about ShelterWell, get involved with them, learn about landlord-tenant issues, how you can help, you can go to ShelterWell.com. No, excuse me, ShelterWell.org. Listeners, thank you for being here as well. Thanks so much for your support of Let's Pod This over these last 5 years, 6 years that we've been doing this crazy little podcast about Oklahoma government and politics. It is because of you that we do this. It is because of you that we exist. If you would like to support this podcast or our organization, Let's Fix This, please go to letsfixthis.org /donate. Just go to letsfixthis.org and click the big donate button up in the top right-hand corner or in the menu on your phone. We would very, very much appreciate it. Look forward to some more episodes coming soon with other folks that share these same kind of values, that are working on the same kinds of issues, and that regularly give you the opportunity to help build a better Oklahoma, the one that we all envision that can exist, that should exist, that will exist when we work together to make it happen. Have a great week.